What's up, everyone? Welcome to the PMR podcast. My name's Andrew. I'm an alcoholic and an addict. This is episode 29. Super excited to have our fifth guest on in a row. Really excited to hear Brad's story and just kick us off again.
Yeah, welcome back. Episode 29. My name's Mitch. I'm an alcoholic addict. Um, Super excited today. We have Brad on. We got connected through Instagram and through a mutual friend, Dan Carity. And he's super influential guy and in the recovery community and sharing his experience, strength, and hope, and runs the page Sober Motivation. Super excited to have you on today.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you, boys. Wow, great introduction, and I love it. Thank you so much for having me, and I'm extremely grateful.
Thank you, man. Yeah, and we were thinking we've just been trying to reach out and bring all sorts of people on, and I know we've been talking a little bit here and there, and I talked to with or I saw some posts from Dan, seeing and hearing about your story, and it sounded like you have a pretty, like everyone, pretty wild story of coming from what you've come from and coming out of that. So we'd love to have you share that with us if you're open to that.
Yeah, of course. Where do you want me to start? At the beginning?
Yeah, let's hear
Okay.
what you got from.
Yeah,
Yeah, and
cool.
I just
Yeah,
I just
so
want to I just want to comment too, like before you kick us off, Brad. I'm sitting here thinking, um, how cool it is like that we got connected up with Dan and Mitch. Like we both went on with Dan, he came on ours. And then like we have this like network growing, and I think it's really cool. Like I I had my reservations like being on your podcast. Like Mitch, this is your brainchild, and like I don't want to go into a whole monologue, but I'm super grateful. Like this morning, sitting here thinking like, wow, we have this like we have this growing network and some really really cool people that have strengthened my recovery just coming on and sharing their stories. So Brad, like I'm just really really thankful you're here, and I'm excited to hear from you, man.
yeah, beautiful. Yeah, so I guess I'll start at the beginning. I was born in 87, and my mom was 16 years old. She had twins. So I think right from the beginning that posed some challenges, right? So my mom is finishing up high school. My grandparents are doing most of the raising and maybe parenting from what I can remember and what I've gathered over the years. I mean, that's great, but it also posed a little bit of a problem too. Your grandparents, at least my grandparents, they give you everything you want, right? They just want to see you smile. And your parents, on the other hand, work on setting boundaries and maybe more rule enforcements and trying to get you through the motions of life, right? To learn some of those things. And when I was about 7 years old, we moved down to Texas. So I was born up here in Canada, and we moved down to Texas, and it was a complete start over, right? There's a little bit of a culture difference, obviously, from going from Canada to Texas. There's a difference, right? You're sort of on the outside, right? Like you're the new person in school, you're the new person everywhere. And now it was only my mom that was looking after us. My brother and I, right? She started out in nursing. And when you start out in a career like that too, you have to work the overnight shift, the evening shifts. You don't just get like the 9 to 5 right off the bat, right? So we were juggling all of that. There was a lot of babysitters involved and stuff like that. So I think I my mom like is an incredible human. Like definitely saved my life on many occasions, and has been the biggest support for me. But I think that transition, there was a lot of trauma that happened, right? Like not intentionally, but the feeling. I always had this feeling of I wasn't worthy of the space I took up in this world. And so what I did with that is I just isolated. I struggled to build connection with my peers. I struggled early on with behavioral problems. I was diagnosed with ADHD and put on Adderall. I couldn't tell you that I ever passed a test through traditional school. I never did well. I did okay with sports, but I was never good enough to like make any of the school teams or anything like that. I tried out, for the soccer team. This was in like grade 8. And man, I was the only one not to make the team. And when I look back, it was like, yeah, that was hard, but like it was really disappointing to be, and I don't even think it was based on the soccer abilities, but I think it was more based on I just wasn't that guy. I just wasn't a cool guy. I was on the outskirts of things, and I started getting suspended from school, like in middle school, grades 6, 7, and 8, in school suspension. I mean, that was like my thing. And then it kind of graduated, and then I would start getting suspended outside of school. This would kind of cause problems at home because my folks had to go to work, and it would just cause a lot of different problems. And I had the ADHD in there, and through high school, I was taking this Adderall medication, but what it did is it just turned off even more my ability to connect with people. So I just had very little friendships, and just I wasn't able to like really develop the friendships with people that were going to be good. And I kept getting in trouble. The behaviors just escalated. I started to feel really depressed. I started to feel a lot of anxiety. I started to skip school. I did everything to basically avoid feeling. Now, the whole interesting part here is I never got into drugs and alcohol during high school. And some people are like, "Oh, it's kind of strange." But when I drum it up and look back, like I wasn't a cool kid. So who's gonna want, I mean, you have to be part of a circle of people that are doing this stuff. And I just wasn't a part of that crew. Like I didn't have that availability to like um, smoke weed or drink beer or any of that stuff. When I got off the Adderall though, I used to pretend I was taking it after a while to my folks. Like they would be like, "Oh, you gotta take your medicine." I would pretend I was taking it and I didn't take it. And this is when things really tailspin, because I did feel like more of myself, but also the behaviors like 100x. So constantly like running away from home, fighting with my parents, getting suspended from school, risky behaviors. My buddies and I, like in an attempt to fit in with the crowd, we started garage hopping, and we got busted. When I was 16, we got busted for garage hopping. And little did I know this was a felony charge. And in the state of North Carolina, I was living in North Carolina at the time we moved there. This was a big deal. So I got taken down to the county jail. I'll never forget that. Actually, I got taken down to the county jail, and you go to the big jail where everybody else, 16, you're at the time you were an adult. I think this might have changed since then, but bring you downtown. It's like 9 stories. It's a daunting place. Like from the outside, it might look like a office building, but you can always tell a jail because it has those really thin, long windows that like 99% of people's bodies would never fit out of. So you can't escape. So you can always identify that place downtown. And they brought me in there, and you have to get booked in, right? When you get a charge, for this charge anyway, you had to get booked in. So you had to go through the booking process, then complete. Your parents would have to pay. My folks would have to pay money for a bail. So you go in front of the judge, magistrate, they call it. I think it's a judge of some sort, but you go in front of them, they set your bail. Like I'm 16 years old. Like definitely I have a lot of dysfunction in my life, but I was like, oh man, like this will wake me up, right? So, but even more of that story, right? I entered this little cell. I don't know if it's a cell. It was like a room. Um, it's not like the old school jails where there's bars everywhere. Like these are windows. There's windows all around it, but it's all block concrete. And this one guy, he didn't look much older than me, and he was on the phone and he was just sobbing, crying, like sobbing, and I was just so uncomfortable in this jail cell. And I had this idea to like ask him what was going on. And like after I'd been to prison, and that's farther in my story. But I know this is something you just don't do. But I did that because I was so uncomfortable. Like I gotta create some dialogue here because this is really weird. And I asked him, and he had told me that he was being accused of killing his girlfriend in New York City, and he was taking the train down to Florida, and that's when he got busted. And I'm like, man, I really got to straighten out my life. Not that that's where I was headed, but I'm like, I can't, like, this is actually really scary. I never envisioned myself coming in close quarters in a locked room with somebody who was being accused of this. I don't know how things played out, but it was really scary at 16, right? So, I mean, there's probably more trauma, right? Like, probably piled on more trauma with these different situations. Um, yeah, any questions about any of this, or you want me just to
Yeah.
keep rolling?
You can keep rolling or questions, but I did want to say that to the Adderall piece, I feel like a lot of people And I even like haven't included that in my story to an extent because I didn't feel like it was noteworthy when it comes to like drugs and alcohol. But the more that I've talked to other people and heard about it, I mean, I was abusing Ritalin and Adderall from middle school into high school heavily, and then into college. It was like I had the max dosage and was like maxing that out. So I feel like that may be an origin drug, if you will, for a lot of addicts and alcoholics because it's so heavily prescribed and because, it's more like, oh, it's just Adderall. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it could definitely be a thing. I mean, I'm sure out there somewhere there's got to be some sort of research about ADHD and stuff when it comes to this too, because I feel like when I look back, that when I did find the drugs and alcohol, in a sense, it could have been a self-medicating piece for that as well. The racing thoughts and
Hmm.
obviously, drugs and alcohol definitely like slow that whole process down, right? Numbs out that process, slows down the thinking of like everything's going to be a disaster. So it's definitely an interesting idea for sure.
Yeah,
Um,
I just had a question too. Like, I mean, not more of a comment, I guess. Like, I think it's I was on. I guess I was prescribed drugs that brought me in the different direction. I'm diagnosed with OCD, and I was on, the Razapam, Ativan, all like the low power benzos from a young age. And it's funny, like you kind of tell, like, you didn't want to take them because you like you didn't feel like yourself when you were on them, and you were like you would isolate, and it would even bring you further kind of away from like the social crowd. And I kind of had my experience was like I was honestly like a little different. Like from that age, like I almost knew, like, if I don't take these, then I'm gonna feel like even more like an alien. Like, and I'm just gonna like I'm not gonna want to see, like, I'm not going to want to see anyone. I'm not, I'm going to be so wrapped up in my own thoughts. I'm not going to want to like socialize at all. So I was like drug seeking from a young age because I thought that like the pills and the prescriptions were like a key to me being a normal person. Like it just like kind of unlocked that for me. But I know the prescription grind from a young age.
yeah, yeah, for sure. Yeah, it definitely impacts everybody in their own type of way for sure. But so I had that experience there with with that arrest, right? So that's at
Mm.
16. And that the court and everything goes through. So I was facing like a year in jail. I mean, it's my first time, so that wasn't, necessarily going to be the case. My folks had to obviously dish out money for an attorney and for the bail and for all this stuff, right? Like it was just not good. Um and I got put on probation. So I had this probation officer, and I mean, she was a tough cookie. This lady was just tough. She would come to the school, right? So I still, part of my probation conditions was to attend classes, don't miss any classes, take my medication. I was on medication now too for depression. What exactly it was, I couldn't tell you. I've been seeing therapists, psychiatrists,
Mm.
psychologists, doctors, learning centers my entire life. That was like my
Yeah.
ever since I could remember. There was there was dysfunction. I mean, that's just sort of maybe a nice way to put this thing in a little box here. Is there was just dysfunction in every single area of my life. So of course my folks were incredibly like proactive with trying to help out to find solutions for this. So like I give them huge credit. My grandfather just passed a few years ago, and he used to call me two things. He used to call me the $1 million man, and he used to call me the man without a country. And I can get into that further later. But and that's where the $1 million man kind of came from, is the interventions over the years my parents set out for me, right? Like this stuff was very, very expensive for
Mm.
treatments and different things. But yeah, so I got this probation officer. She would come to the school, and like I just couldn't follow the rules. I was extremely defiant. And I would just get depressed, and I would just like my fight or flight, it was just always flight. I would just avoid situations. I would leave the situation. The anxiety would just build up. And I had no idea how to channel this stuff. So I would just avoid the classroom and stuff that just brought it on even more. I just couldn't sit still, right? You got the ADHD in there as well. you're feeling depressed, you're overwhelmed. I don't do well in school at all. Never ever did well. I never read a book. I never studied. I never did any of that. So it's like, well, to me, it just didn't make much sense to show up, right? So she came down on me hard though for this. And then they started doing drug testing. And this might have been another reason why I never got into drugs, but they decided to push forward drug testing. So I had to go like every week and do the probation and pee in a cup. And one time I couldn't pee, so they did fail me for the drug test, but I wasn't doing any drugs or anything. That was just like they were strict, right? They watch you. You have somebody in there, watching you use the washroom and stuff. So like, it's a strange experience all in itself. But I mean, one I brought upon myself in a sense. I'm not gonna like blame them for their processes. I don't think that they're the most productive, but I was the one, out there doing stuff that wasn't good. So this probation officer really came down on me. But looking back, maybe it was helpful. At the time, it was chaos, but maybe it was helpful. Um, and then I started to get really, really depressed. I had this relationship and it was a complete dumpster fire. It was so bad, it was just so toxic, and I couldn't handle with the rejection. The codependency just came, big time. I started to look for value in myself and value in the relationship, and it was something that was so inconsistent. It was just terrible. Um, and so I started to feel really suicidal after things weren't working out. So I had made comments on one occasion that, hey, I was just feeling this way, and like I wasn't there, but I was maybe headed in that direction. So my parents caught wind of this. They checked me in. They put me on a 72-hour hold at a psychiatric hospital. Um, it was just really just to hang out. I wouldn't say it was, it was like 16 at the time, 16. Yeah, first time was 16, and yeah, it was to hang out for a little bit. We wrote some songs and some, lyrics for some songs and stuff. Wasn't much, what not much took place. I didn't really take it all serious either. Like I didn't really take this stuff serious. And then it happened again. So I had made another comment about where I was headed and how, things were dark, and I just didn't see a future for myself and stuff like that. So this was actually at school. So the police showed up. They were like, you got to go to get an assessment done. And, I refused and everything. But at the end of the day, it was basically told to me, like, you either do this willingly or we do this for you. And I was already on the probation. So I'm like, yeah, you know what? Like, I'll do it. I'll go and hang out for another couple of days. This time was different though. This time was much different. In other parts of my life it was a complete disaster. Um, Everything was just really, really bad. So I go to the hospital there, and like it's 3 days in, right? And things are different this time. I'm not leaving this time. They're like, oh, we got to take your shoes because you're a risk to run away and stuff. And I'm like, why would I run away? I'll be out of here tomorrow. Little did I know my parents had some plans in the background, and I had an interview with this treatment facility. It was a 3-month facility. It was about like 60 miles from where I lived. I lived in Apex, North Carolina at the time. And the guy was like, yeah, we need to get some help for the behavioral stuff. You need to, get some structure in your life and some support. And we can help you. We have counselors. We have a group program, and you can go to school and hopefully do better and, all that stuff. And I'm like, you got to be kidding me. I'm not, there's nothing wrong with me. This is all just a season and it'll be over, so soon. I got this figured out. So I told Buddy, like, nah, I'm just not interested. The thing with that program is you could only go there if you like voluntarily were like, yeah, I'll check it out. So that was that. 2 days later, I wake up in the psych ward, or they probably have a fancier name for it now, but at the time it was a psychiatric ward. It was a UNC hospital. And there's somebody kicking on the bed. And I kind of woke up in this daze, and the guy was a big guy. I mean, just ripped, 300 pounds. And I mean, just cut up like a brick shit house. And I said, this guy doesn't work here. This is not somebody who works here. So something's up. And then there was this woman as well. And I mean, she was fit as well. And I'm like, oh man, like this is not good. And they're like, hey, your parents have hired us to bring you to this treatment program. And I'm like, yeah, I'm not going to any treatment program. They're like, well, it's okay. It's not really going to work like that. So I said, whatever, I'll go. But when I said I'll go to this program, my wheels are turning. All I know how to do in my life is run and escape. I don't know how to I never learned how to face myself. So as soon as I said I'd go, I'm planning my escape from these. This is a private security company. I later found out that my folks hired to transport me to this program. I went to this program called Peninsula Village. It's no longer around, but it was so these people, we hop in there, they've got, I don't know, Escalade, Explorer, serious. These people are serious. They know what they're doing. They played the nice guy card though. Yeah, we're just going to take you here. Everything's going to be good. I just played along too. I was like, yeah, this is going to be great. And I kind of changed my mind a bit. I need some help. I asked him, I said, I got to go to the washroom. So we got to pull over on the side of the interstate at one of the rest stops. I went for the washroom, and Buddy was holding the back of my shorts, but I had on a pair of athletic shorts. So there's a lot of flexibility to it. So we go out in the parking lot, and it just hit me like, run. And I took off, and Buddy followed me. But like on the edge of parking lots, on the edge of the road, there's like that drainage dip. It comes down and then it goes back up. He hit the ground. He just fell face first into the ground, and I just split. And then on the side of the highway too, they've got those little metal fences, maybe with one row of barbed wire on the top. I hit that thing full speed because I didn't see it, and I just flipped right over it. It was the craziest thing. But like all this happened so fast, and I was on the run. From this, I was on the run from this security detail my parents had hired to bring me to rehab. How more unmanageable can your life get? Honestly, this time I was 17 years old. I'm out of the psychiatric hospital for the second time. I'm like, I have a misdemeanors on my record. I'm on probation. I'm failing out of school. I'm running away from home. My relationships are a complete disaster. And now I have this company my parents hired to bring me, and I'm running away from them. And when I look back, I'm like, dude, the writing was on the wall. Like, your life was not headed to anywhere good. So yeah, I go on the run from these guys. It lasts only like maybe 6-7 hours. I'm in the middle of nowhere. I have no phone, like nothing. And eventually I ran into a beehive. So I ran into this beehive, and I got stung so many times from the bees. And I was just in pain. I was worn down. No phone, middle of nowhere. And I see this cop car, and I'm like, yeah, I mean, they're looking for me. So it's a state trooper. He's like, you stand right there. We'll throw you in the car. So he brought me back to the security company. They threw handcuffs on me now. And they're like, it all changed, right? From like, nice guy, we're going to get you some help. I was crying, man. I mean, I just knew like my life was just about to change, whether I liked it or not. And that was like hard because I wanted to be in control of everything. They brought me to this place. I'll never forget it, man. Peninsula Village, buddy. 3 sides water, Tennessee River, Jones Bend Road. One way in, one way out. And it's a community, but it's a treatment center. You could call it a treatment center. There in the middle of this community, it's on like this island, or the peninsula. So 3 sides water. You're not escaping through the water. The Tennessee River, you'll drown long before you ever even get a quarter of the way across it. Just the current and everything. So they bring me into this basement, right? So I walk into this basement, and I mean, it just looks like something out of a movie, buddy. Try to paint a picture here. You have all half walls. So it's half walls, and then you have bunks, so like hospital, the green mattresses. I don't know if you guys ever seen them, but green mattresses, they have those everywhere. And there's a guy sitting on the floor, and he's in a hospital gown. And I'm like, on a bed. And I'm like, holy smokes, what is this? I look on the windows. There's chicken wire. I mean, heavy duty stuff, like a screen that locks. It goes over the windows, and then it would lock. And the door, they lock it behind you. Bang. It's like there's 4 at this time. There's 4, grown men in there. And everybody's quiet. Nobody's saying anything. They're just staring at me like the new guy. Right. And,
Jesus.
what I realized is I wasn't going anywhere. This was no longer a voluntary. Well, never was, but this wasn't going to be an option, a voluntary thing. There was no escape. So that was Peninsula Village. That was the first day. They had a little timeout room where they would do restraints, straight jackets. And it was just a bunch of, I don't know, I guess dysfunctional people. Some people struggled with addiction. Other people struggle with extreme behavior stuff, fighting. And that would be, yeah, the first date of the rest of my life, I guess, when I showed up there. So
Dang.
that would be a 12-month program.
12 month.
Yeah.
You're there a whole year.
12-month program.
Yeah, a whole year. Yeah. So it started out in this basement. This was what I found out later, right? Because I never saw this place or anything. I didn't know like where I was. I didn't know anything about this. My parents had just signed me over to this place to get help. And this is called this STU, Special Treatment Unit. It was basically um the rules to everything. You had to raise your hand if you wanted to ask questions. You had to you couldn't talk all day, you couldn't read books, there was absolutely no distractions. You literally had to sit there and think about like, hey, how did I get here and what am I going to do about it? It was the old treatment philosophy of break a person down and then
Yep.
rebuild from there. So yeah, that was 3 months in the basement, but I did hear something down there that completely changed my life because you can change your environments, but it doesn't necessarily change you. And I was still defiant and I was still behavioral problem in different ways. Like you couldn't act out, you couldn't mess around. They had little buzzers around their neck. It was like a little button. If you were acting up, they would press that button and then more staff would come from the campus and then they would do a restraint. So, I mean, you couldn't, you could act up, but then that was going to happen. It would sound off these alarms and then, everybody would run in. I mean, it was crazy. It was madness. But 2 months into this, I wasn't buying into the program. And this one staff there, Mr. Riddle, never forget this guy. I mean, he was an asshole, but he was genuinely trying to be a good person. I think he just had a very weird way of doing it. Every time I wanted to ask a question, I had to recite the 12 steps. If I got it wrong, no question. And he would maybe make me wait like 3 hours before I could ask again. So like if you have to go to the washroom, you're waiting 3 hours, whether you like it or not. So I had to recite the 12 steps. But he told me, he said, Brad, look, this is the deal. And the staff there never got friendly with you. It was very strict boundaries of like, hey, we're not your friends. We don't want to have conversation with you. You're here to do one thing, which is change your life. We're not your buddies. We're none of that stuff. And that was very, very clear. But he kind of opened the door one day for me on the low. And he said, look, this is the deal. You're not going to get out of here for 4 months. Like it was 2 months in, right? Most people would leave this basement in like maybe a month. And I was 2 months in, like living in this basement, taking vitamin D pills because you don't go outside. You never go outside. You stay in this basement on this bed. You wake up at 6 a.m. You make your bed. You stand by it. You get it checked off. You do chores. You do group. You have your meal. You have your lunch. You do another group. You sit there quietly, for basically the rest of the day. Like it was just brutal. I got used to it though. So it bothered me, but I don't know how much it bothered me because I wasn't really willing to do much. But he told me this. He said, Brad, you're going to have to do something different. You need to fake it till you make it. And I said, yeah, I don't know what that means. And a couple of days later, I had this window of opportunity where for some reason the stars aligned and I got what he was saying. He's like, you just need to put on a show. Just pretend you're interested. Do everything you're asked. You'll get out of this basement and maybe you'll have a chance to change your life. And I started to do that like right away. I just like nothing inside of my body wanted to follow these rules, but I was just put on a smile and I said, you know what? Like, let's do the chores. Let's clean the toilets. I'm gonna clean this toilet the best anybody's ever cleaned this toilet. And I just did everything opposite of what I wanted to do. Like was probably the simplest way to put it. And a couple months later or another couple weeks later, man, they gave me a shot to go into the cabin program. So this is where you were out in the wilderness, like, well, not really wilderness, but you lived in a cabin, no running water, no power. We had a hot stove. We lived up on this it wasn't a mountain, but it was like a big hill. And I joined the Bat Clan, like Batman, Bat Clan. And I began to put in the work, man, to change my life. We used to do meetings. We used to do school. We used to do vocational work, build running trails. We used to hit the gym. We used to exercise. Everything was structured down to the second. There was no question about what you were going to do. You woke up at 6 a.m. in the morning. You did a quick meeting. You cleaned the cabin in the dark. You swept the floor. You mopped it. You made your bed. You folded your clothes. It was structured down to a T, every single thing. And we would chop firewood. We'd cut that all up. We did a lot of stuff. We'd have to walk, in the morning for breakfast, you'd have to walk about 3 miles. and I just remember the chafing because you had to wear jeans, tuck in your shirt. I remember the chafing from in the summertime, walking this because every meal you'd have to walk that, and I never knew what Gold Bond was, but like it was a savior because you had to have it because just your inner legs would just be like the skin would just be gone from them, and you had to carry different stuff across. It wasn't like you were just casually walking. You had a formation, and there was a science to everything. But yeah, that was that program. I mean, I could talk about that for honestly hours, but that was that program. And then when I got out, oh, did you have something? Anyone?
Uh,
Any?
I'm I'm just like you're a very captivating speaker. And then your story is unreal. It sounds like yeah. I want to keep listening, but yeah, I was just gonna say quickly that the I think just sounds so wild how regimented it was and how like hardcore the some of those older treatment facilities were. But all I'm thinking is like obviously we've blended there's a blended way to do it that's much probably healthier, but there is a point to like how serious it is for us to have some of that structure and like hardcore-ness, because it's not a game, like recovery and getting sober is not a game. It's very much your life is on the line. And I think it gets lost in some of these loosey-goosey vacation rehabs that we have today around some places, where like it's just like you go there for 3 months, 6 months, whatever, pay a ton of money, and you come back worse, maybe. So I'm sorry that some of the stuff that you went through sounds like it was way too much and like very too hardcore for sure. But I think that like, had they dialed it down a couple notches, but kept some of those structure principles and stuff like that, that's probably a happy medium of like how serious it needs to be taken.
Yeah, no, so true. And through the program too, they had these levels. I always love talking about the levels because once you went to the cabin program, you started out as a pre-mouse. So you had to be you're on a 3-foot rope restriction. So you have to be with a higher level person, but you have a 3-foot rope. You can't talk to the staff. So if you want to ask the staff that are working with you a question, you have to go through your older member. And then like they decide whether this is like a relevant question. So it was very like the hierarchy was very enforced. So you started as this pre-mouse. You have like big time restrictions. If you want to get off the rope, you have to ask to break it. Like, hey, can we break? Or else you have to stay on it. And like if you weren't doing well, you'd have to stay on it. You might have to eat meals. Like you wouldn't have to have like a shower or sleep with the 3 foot with somebody else, but like you'd have to do a lot of things, right? And then you would move up to the mouse. But the whole idea of the mouse is when we start out on this journey on like this self-discovery or this recovery or the sobriety journey, we really can only see what's so like really right in front of us. It's all about us. It's all about what we want, getting our needs met. And that was the place of the mouse was like, hey, we need to break that cycle. Like this is not all about you. Um, there's a world going on around you, and you need to figure out how to be a productive member of it, the way that it's set up in a sense, right? So that was really interesting. And then you move on to the bear. So if you wanted to level up and you wanted to reach a bear, you'd have to write goals. So you'd have to write 5 goals and 5 different topics. And you'd have to get all your peers to review the goals, and then you'd have to get them all to sign and agree that you could be moving up to a different level. And then the staff members would also review the goals. This was like a month-long process. And then the idea of the bear is it's time to look within. So like, yeah, it's great and everything that, like you move past that part of like yourself and being fully yourself. Now it's time to dig inside and figure out like what the heck is going on here. And you'll spend a couple months being a bear. And then you can move to, they call it a bear adoha, which means you can walk freely. So now when you reach that level, you could roam the campus freely. Which I mean, obviously from where it started, that's an incredible privilege that you would like really appreciate. Like you can walk around on your own again. And then you move to a level which I reached, which not many people there did reach, like very, very few. I only ever saw one. Is a level of an eagle. So an eagle basically soars above. Like obviously, eagles fly, but the part about the eagle is the bigger picture. So if you're able to reach the eagle level, then that's signaling that you're able to see that like the bigger picture of things. And that was incredible. And then as an alumni, you can reach the level of the Buffalo, which is more about wisdom and experience and all that stuff. But I always thought the levels were really cool. It kind of followed the medicine wheel of kind of teaching. So I thought that was really cool. But we got to get going here. I left this program and I got enrolled in college, which was never going to be a possibility for me. I graduated the program. I went back home. I got my own apartment. I went to school. I got a part-time job flipping burgers. And things were really good, man. I connected with this girl I knew from high school actually, and she was just straight edge. I mean, just a beautiful human. I connected with her. Shortly after that, we moved in together. And, by this whole time, right, a lot of people are like, man, what, you got sober here. I never did really, drugs and all that stuff before this, right? I never did. This is more of like a behavioral treatment. Like I obviously was headed there. All of these are all red flags. And luckily, probably the probation and my parents intervening early on in this process, or else I would have ended up there sooner type deal. So I left there. And I stopped, I just stopped doing what I was supposed to be doing. I stopped doing my therapy. I stopped doing my medications. I just slowly reverted back to the mouse. I went back to the mouse. It was all about me. It was about my needs. I was self-centered. I was selfish. And I was back at a mouse. And that's a big problem. That's a big problem. So then what happened is I got into drinking a bit, right? So me and the boys would be hanging out. I had this apartment, right? I was like 18 years old and I had this place, right? I was living at this place. It was government subsidized housing. I ended up getting into this. The rent was like $400 a month for a 2-bedroom. I mean, like beautiful, what a deal, right? So I had the boys over and yeah, we just started getting into drinking, man. And it didn't, none of this stuff took over right away. But what really was my downfall is I was having a poker game one night and a buddy came over. Guy, I loosely knew this guy. He worked at the restaurant, right? The restaurant's, it's a terrible place for drugs and alcohol. Like literally, it's just terrible place. So guy comes over. He's got this bottle. It's like, I'm like, what are you doing? Are you not feeling well? Like, what are you doing at the card game? See, I didn't know anything about drugs, or even when I was in treatment for that long, we talked about drugs and alcohol 2 times. Other than that, it wasn't the problem. We never focused on, for other people who struggled with that, we just never focused on that being the problem. And even when we went to recovery meetings, we went off campus or on campus or whatever, it's just never really was like, hey, let's just talk about drugs and alcohol. It just never was that. So I didn't have any education experience. But long story short, buddy pulls out the pill. He's like, oh, these are pain pills. And I'm like, I'm trying to understand why this guy's taking, at our poker game, he's taking this damn prescription. Like, this is not making sense to me. I said, dude, you got to break this down for me. What the hell are you doing taking a prescription while we're sitting here playing cards? He said, oh, it makes you feel good and stuff. I said, dude, there's no way. Like, there's no way. I said, what's it cost for one of those? It's like $5. I said, consider it done. Throw me one of those pills. What I experienced there was a relief from myself. I experienced the ultimate relief from the person that was unworthy, the little boy that just felt like the world was going on around me and I was never part of it. And I had felt that before in the treatment center, but I had to work so damn hard for it. I had to work 12 months to get there. This was $5. I mean, I can come up with $5. It was a heck of a lot easier. I was at the mouse. If I was acting like an eagle, I would have looked at things differently, but my perception was that of a mouse. And the mouse just wants a quick fix. So I got my quick fix, And after that, my wheels started turning. I never experienced something like this before. I mean, this was a godsend, man. I'm like, this is something that's out there. I started to work on how I was going to get more. Google, talk to people. I talked with the girl I was dating at the time. And there was a stash. I don't like to tell too many details on this story because of other people implicated, but I was able to get my hands on a whole shoebox of medications within a short order of time. And I was in college at the time. I was stressed out, bills, everything, life happens. I start eating these things. Bottle says 4 to 6 a day. Shit, 8 to 10 won't hurt, right? I'll have an extra meal, have some more water. 8 to 10 won't hurt. And I had, hundreds and hundreds of these medications. And I was just eating them every single day for like a month, 2 months. I don't know the exact time frame, but I ate them until they were gone. And then obviously, as you guys probably know, now I've got a big time physical dependence to this stuff and
Mm-hmm.
probably other things as well. And I run out and boy, did I ever feel bad. Man, I was like, holy, and I had felt a little bit of withdrawal before, but I never let myself get maybe too far into it because I had more. So maybe I was out somewhere and I started to feel a little uncomfortable. But once I got home, bang, right? I didn't go too far from the goods, or I'd bring the goods or whatever. But this time, when I ran out, I wasn't a street guy. I wasn't hanging out with other people doing this stuff. That guy went about his business. My other buddies, they were just drinking beer, enjoying the college life, chasing girls around, playing cards. We would have, tequila taco night, that sort of stuff. They were living, a regular, probably college life, like type thing. Me, I was overboard. And so I ran out of pills. So I started to kind of do my research, find out what was going on in this little town I lived in. I think it maybe was 30,000 people at the time. So it wasn't very big. And I found out this old buddy of mine that I used to play basketball with him every single day, like in grade 5, 6, 7, 8. And then we kind of separate. We kind of went different ways, maybe in like grade 10 or 11 in high school. I found out he was the guy in town for all this stuff. So I started to get, basically that would kind of start my illegal drug trade. But I also did cocaine before that too. I was at a party. We were at this college party. We were drinking, partying. Buddy I met at the restaurant again. He was partying with us, and he we were ready to go. So he was going to drive home, and he had it was a dollar bill all wrapped up, all folded up, all weird. And I'm like, dude, what are you doing? Like with this dollar bill or whatever. Like, he's like, oh, I got some powder in there. And I said, powder? The heck do you do with that stuff? Like, I was so naive to this stuff. You know what I mean? Like, it's just, when I look back, I'm like, dude, I was just so naive. And like, so he's like, yeah, you want to try a little bit? And I'm like, yeah, sure. Nothing really happened, man. I wouldn't say it was like the movies where like my life fell apart the next day, but it provided me a little bit of escape, a little bit of an escape, and I kept going back to it. So I had like this cocaine problem, I had this prescription pill problem, um, and yeah, man, that's kind of where it all started. And then I would go obviously to the street or and then I got involved with more people that were like using drugs and doing that, but and then just a long story short, I got arrested again too when I was like 18, 18, 19. I got arrested again. Now we had a genius idea of not garage hopping, but stealing from cars. So a buddy of mine went up to the car. I was the lookout, right? I was looking out, and it was like 3 a.m, right? It was late. I thought for sure we're good. We're good for this. And he goes to open up the door, and then this guy's like, "Hey, what are you doing?" And he's got his dog out and stuff. And I'm like, "Oh man." So we didn't even go into the car, but I mean, I learned later that really doesn't matter. I mean, if you open that door, that's a felony. It's serious business. And I didn't even open the door, but I learned too down the road that you're guilty by association. It doesn't matter if you're the one who does it. So these are some hard lessons I had to learn along the way. So me and my buddy split though. Bang, we're gone. 3 a.m, we're in this really small town of 15 people, one road in, one road out of this place. And my car was parked like 3 blocks over. I ended up losing that car. My parents had just bought it for me, $15,000. They had just bought this nice Honda. It was a Honda Accord. I mean, I just put a radio in it, a little stereo, and like it was nice, man. It was cool for me. And it was gone after that. That's a whole nother story. But me and him split. I went to the pool. They have pools there, the different neighborhoods, and they have a phone there. We didn't have the cell phones and all that fun stuff then. They have a phone there. So I called my girlfriend at the time. I said, you got to come pick us up. We're in Holly Springs, me and Jordan. She's like, what's going on? I'm like, don't even worry about it. 3 a.m, like nothing's going on. You got to just come pick us up. We're about to leave this little town, and then the lights turn on. And I tried to tell the cops, like, hey, man, we're just, coming back from a party and stuff. He's like, dude, this is ridiculous. Just get out of the car. So I'm like, all right. And then at this time, too, I had lost my apartment. I got evicted from my apartment. I got kicked out of college, too. I lost a job, and everything was starting to burn down around me. And I was back at my parents' place. And I have a younger brother. I have a twin brother, and I have a younger brother. And that night after I got arrested, I got booked into the jail again. Now I was 18. I was like a true adult. My brother and my girlfriend came and bailed me out. It was like bail was like 5,000, but if you paid 750 to a bondsman, they could get you out. And then what happened the next day? I went home. I got home late at night. I went home to my parents' place. I went to sleep, and buddy, they left a charge or something off the books. So if they charge you again, they got to arrest you again, and you got to bail out again. So they show up at my folks' place, upper middle class. I mean, I wouldn't say they were loaded, but it's a middle class place. You don't see the cops going to people's doors type deal. Cops show up. My younger brother's getting ready for school. My stepdad is there as well. And I mean, he's always been a very strict person. Like this, was like that's a no. And cops show up and I get arrested there, and they've got this big entrance. It opens up and then it goes 2 floors. And you can see because you come down the stairs, it's right there in the entrance, and I could just see him and my younger brother getting ready for school, and I just knew I fucked up. Yeah, I just knew that again. I mean, this is the story of my life. I just knew again, like this is going to hit a bit different because my folks were willing to let me stay there, and this was going to hit a bit different. So after I got out of jail, then I stayed at my girlfriend's place, at her parents' place, like just a mess. And I stayed in another place. But yeah, that's kind of how things played out. So now I was a convicted felon. I had to pay for court. My girlfriend's parents paid for court. I was just a bum. I bummed off everybody. I was a good person, but I was on a mission just to escape life. And it caused a lot of, problems. And I eventually got on heroin. We ran out of the pills, right? The pills dried up. Everybody kind of knows that story if you kind of been following it. The pills dried up, became too expensive. Like they push these pills out to people for dang near everything. If you had a headache, you were getting Oxycontin, and then they dried up, and then in what was left became too expensive. So we all switched over to doing heroin. I mean that's just the way it was. It was what was available. We could get it easier, for so many different reasons. And I was still doing the cocaine and stuff, and then I went to detox. I had this. I was on methadone. I got off the heroin and I got on methadone. And I was on methadone for about a year. I was still doing cocaine. I was still drinking. I couldn't always get my methadone because I was drinking. They used to make me blow this breathalyzer every morning. I had to drive 30 minutes to the clinic and 30 minutes home. Keep in mind, I have no job, no car. I use my brother's car. At this time, I'm living on my brother's couch / my brother's floor. If he had people over, I would have to sleep in his bedroom on the floor. And like, this is where my life got to. And we would hang out at the pool and drink a 24 Keystone dang near every other day. If I could find somebody to hang out and I had $12 in my pocket, like that's what I was doing. And like, I'm thinking back, I'm like, terrible, terrible. And I was into that stuff and it was hard for the methadone. My life was just completely unmanageable. I had to pay the $12 a day to get the methadone. And I was working a job at Little Caesars too, towards the end. I got fired from a Little Caesar, but when I was working there, I had no car. I burned all my bridges. I used to have to walk to this job. Sometimes I'd only work a 3-hour shift for like 6.25 an hour. And I'd have to walk there like maybe 2 hours. And like in North Carolina, like it got pretty hot during the summer. Like my life was just honestly, like it was just a train wreck. And my parents, for extra money, they would never give me money, but they would let me work in their backyard. So sometimes I would work at the Little Caesars from, 6, 7, 8 hours. And then I'd walk to my folks' place. Would take me about an hour, and then I would like maybe do some work in the yard, and they'd pay me $10 an hour just so I could get the money to get the methadone and the gas every day. That was my life. And then I kind of had this, I don't know, I don't even know how to really put it, but I had this window of opportunity, like something. I felt this way one morning on my brother's floor where I was like, dude, you have to do something with your life. Like, this is shit. This is truly shit. It's not fun anymore. I don't know if it was not fun for a long time before that. But I was like, you're going to die. Like literally, you're going to die. And I don't know, like, are you willing to live with that? And I was like, I kind of had this like internal dialogue with myself, right? And I'm like, I am okay with that. But before I get there, I want to give something a shot. Like, let's give this a shot. Let's see if this works out. I mean, in the meantime, I had been through therapy, counseling, 12 step, smart recovery, AA, NA, like I had been to hundreds of meetings, you know, I had seen people do this. I just never thought it was possible for me. I'm like, yeah, great. Like John's figured it out. Like, fuck, good for him. But like, come on, not for me. Um, I had two people left in my life I could reach out to when I woke up on the floor that morning. I picked up the 3,000 pound phone. I called my grandparents up in Canada. Shit, they were in their 60s. I said, "Hey, I gotta get off drugs." They said, "Drug." I hadn't talked to them in a couple of years. I said, "Drugs? What the hell? You know, methadone and cocaine and the booze and all this stuff." And they said, "Oh, like they were like, oh, on the news they're talking about people blowing up their house with meth." And I'm like, "No, it's different, Grandma. It's methadone and that's methamphetamine. It's different." But they had no idea what I was doing. But what grandparents do, man, is they drove down. 60 plus years old. They hopped in the car and they were down there the next day. They got me go to this detox in South Florida. We drove down to South Florida the next day. I went to this detox and yeah, they wanted me to go to rehab. I said, "Guys, I don't have 2 dimes to rub together." My parents on that program there, that was, I mean, I don't know the exact number, but hundreds of thousands of probably dollars. I mean, 12 months of every day, program, plus all of the other things, the lawyers and this and that. I mean, the money was not, nobody was going to sacrifice the money anymore unless there was a guarantee. That's just where it ended up.
Mm-hmm.
My grandparents paid for this detox, $1,000 a day cash. I was there for 9 days. I got off the methadone. I got off everything. And the detox wanted me to go to this program. They say only 5% of people who do the detox stay sober. And I said, "Look, I get it. And I'm not trying to be an outlier here. I get it, but I just don't have the resources right now. I just can't do it." And I had already had the 12 months of the program. So I had something to rely on. I've been down into meetings. I talked to every doctor and, maybe the East Coast, but I had a foundation of something and I knew what to do. I just had to find maybe the courage or the honesty to do it. So my grandparents, we go back, now this is interesting, right? I'm on like this high, this natural high of like, hey, I got off all this shit. I'm in South Florida. This place got a gym, a pool. I'm chilling with cool people. They're making my meals. I'm like, hey, I knock on the door. "Hey, chef, like, can I get some breakfast?" He comes out with like this, 10-star meal, like burrito or for lunch, and it's pancakes with whipped cream on it. Like, this was a beautiful life. And I went back home and I quickly realized, like, dude, my life still sucks. Nothing really changed. I'm still at my brother's place. I owned absolutely nothing. I had, maybe 10 pair of clothes and I had nothing, man. So my grandparents were putting the pressure on me. They said, "Why don't you come back to Canada with us and live up here, start your life over and stuff?" I said, like, how am I going to do that? How in the heck am I? I don't know anybody. I don't have a job. I don't have anything. I'm not that I had a job at home either, but in my mind, I'm like, that seems a bit too extreme. But then the cops were coming to my parents' place. They kept calling me too. They're like, "Yeah, UPS, you gotta secure package. You need to sign for it and stuff." And I'm like, dude, trust me, dude, ain't nobody sending me a package. But it was the cops. They were looking for me again, right? So I'm like, all right, I don't know I didn't know what it was about. So my grandparents came to my brother's place at 6 in the morning. They're like, "We're getting out of here. This is ridiculous. Like, this is too much, The option, it's open." I grabbed a duffel bag of stuff. I mean, literally all I had. I grabbed the bag. I said, "You know what? Fuck it. Let's go. I'll go up there and I'll see what I can do." And I moved up here. And yeah, I mean, I was all right. Like I wasn't sober. I also wasn't burning my life to the ground. But I got a job, man. I was painting. I loved it, painting walls and stuff. Like, for me, it was a good job. I was able to show up and stuff. I started to build a little bit slowly, though, a little bit of confidence in myself. Like, it took me probably about 3 to 4 months for the methadone to kind of clear out of my system, for the anxiety to like not be like destroying me every day, and the depression and everything else. But once that happened, I really started to work on like some self-development stuff. It was a slow grind process, man, basically by myself. I started hitting some meetings. I started hitting Celebrate Recovery. Um, I never planned on getting sober though. I just planned on like living a better life and seeing what happens. That scared me. Like, "Hey, you're going to be sober." I'm like, "No, I'm not interested in that. I want a better life, but I'm not really willing to commit to that yet." So my life kind of completely changed after all of this. After about 8, 9 months up there living with my grandparents, I decided to come back to visit the U.S. I had that girlfriend and I reconnected. My family was still down there, and I was getting on the airplane in Toronto, and the customs, U.S. customs, they were just grilling me, asking me 101 different questions. You got ID? You got this? You got this? And I had this feeling in my stomach. We've all had it. It just feels like a hole, a gaping hole. And I'm like, oh man, something's up. But I followed through with it. And they told me, oh, big misunderstanding. They put me in this back room. They're like interrogating me. And I'm like, dude, I'm just trying to catch a flight. Like, that's it. They searched my bags. And I knew something was up. So I landed. It was a connecting flight. I landed in New York. And when I landed in New York, nothing happened. There was nobody there. So I was like, oh, this is good. So I called my folks. I said, hey, like it was really weird getting on the plane and everything. But all's good here. So I think we're good to go. Type deal. I'll be there in a couple hours. I get the connecting flight. I get off the plane. I'm the last one on the plane with this other young lady. And we were talking the whole time, just shooting, shooting the shit. Everything was cool. And then we're walking off the plane, right? Saying like, hey, no, it's good to chat. Like, enjoy your trip. And I see the cops. I see like 4 or 5 cops, and they got my picture. And I'm like, oh shit. They're like Bradley. That's my legal name, I guess. And I was like, nah, that's not me. Just fooling around. I knew whatever was up. Like there was, that was the end of the road. And they were like, you're under arrest. And I'm like, for what? They're like, we'll tell you when when you get in the car and stuff. They didn't want to make a scene in the airport. No, I wasn't that type of person anyway to like go on the run and make a big scene. But I remember there was another thing that happened during this sequence that completely changed my life is because that young lady who came to pick me up, at the airports, you go around in the circle. You're not really allowed to park and stuff like that, right? So she's driving around in this circle. And they've got the police car. Of course, it parks. And they've got me up on the police car. And out of the corner of my eye, I saw her drive by. I mean, happy as a pig and shit. I mean, she just smiling ear to ear, and looking for me to pick me up. And it was all of the history kind of came down on me of like, Brad, you let so many people down in life, and you've really let yourself down. Like, the hell's going on? And for whatever reason, man, I mean, timing is just an incredibly powerful thing. And that the timing of all of that, me being arrested, spread your leg, put the handcuffs on, and seeing her drive by, I kind of mumbled to myself, like, enough of this shit. Like, the party's over, dude. You got to do something different. And yeah, never forget that day. So I ended up getting arrested for 3 counts of drug trafficking. Long story short, I sold narcotics to an undercover police officer that my buddy set me up with, or whatever. I mean, I'm not upset with him, but he got busted and then he turned it on me. And that was like 3 years ago. But since I was living such a life on my brother's couch and floor, and I wasn't working, driving, nothing, I mean, they couldn't find out where I was to arrest me. So I got booked into the jail. This time I wasn't getting out. The bond was $200,000. My folks were not. I mean, obviously, I didn't know anybody with $200,000. I was going to put it to my name. Nobody was like that. But you guys have anything, or what? Are we going way too long here?
No, I
I'm
mean,
almost done.
no, you're good. I'm just, yeah, I keep wanting to listen. Andrew, are you good with keep going?
Yeah, man, I'm in awe. I need to see where
Yeah.
this ends up.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, this is not, I
Yeah.
relate to so many of your like mental places that you've been, maybe not all the exact experiences, but mentally I'm right on track with that. So let's,
Okay. Cool. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So they take me down to the jail. Or they take me down to the police station first. They're like, "Do you want to call anybody?" So I call my brother. My brother's always been there. But a big part of the motivator for me actually going to that detox is he was losing patience with me as well. Like, enough is enough, dude. Um, but he's always been there to support me. And he came down to the police station, and I couldn't talk with him or anything. They wouldn't let me talk with him. But they were like, yeah, he wants to pass a message on to you, whatever. I don't even know what he said, like hang in there or something. I'm like, yeah, thanks, pal. Like I'll try. Um, so I kind of went in front of the magistrate again. I mean, this is the same jail I've always been to. This is my fourth time down here. I'm already a convicted felon. I've got misdemeanors on my record. I've been on felony probation twice. Um, and I'm like, like I'm I'm fucked. And I was getting my life together, which was kind of the wildest thing about it. Like, was I perfectly doing everything I should be? No, but I was doing. You wouldn't recognize what it was like before and how I was living in Canada. It was night and day. For a guy like me to kind of start to find his way, like just for me to hold a job was like, I mean, that was a miracle in itself. So yeah, they set the bond at 200,000. I knew, hey, like I'm here for a bit. My grandparents and a couple other family members came together and got me this attorney. He was an old district attorney or an assistant district attorney. I mean, the best in town, and it came with another hefty bill. Hence the $1 million man. That's where the name comes because the money was just wild, and I never had any, which makes it even more wild. So basically, I to wrap this up, I spent 12 months in jail. Obviously, I took accountability for all this stuff. There was no really getting around it. Um, this stuff held mandatory sentences, though. So this was a little bit of a problem because the mandatory sentence for drug trafficking was 36 months for each one, or maybe more. I was facing up to 200 months. I think it was like 20 something years or 18 years or something. The defense plan was I was a drug user, not a drug dealer. You know what I mean? Like that was never part of my gig. And then the state was trying to figure out what my role was. And because I'd been to all the treatment, the psychiatrists, the doctors, the lawyer did a really good job gathering the evidence. I mean, 5 binders this big. Hey, this guy is a drug user, a drug addict. He's not a drug dealer. But still, I had a bunch of strikes on my record. So my lawyer said, hey, this is the deal. The district attorney's not willing to agree upon like a 6 to 10 month or 6 to 12 month sentence. So what our option is we go in front of the judge and the judge will decide. And I'm like, I already been in jail for 10 months before this case went up the ladder, right? And before we could kind of maybe get in front of the right judge. There's a huge strategy involved in this whole court process. So after like 10 months, buddy, they grabbed me out of I lived in a dormitory jail though, not like individual cells. So it was a dorm of like 100 people. God, the noise was just brutal. The violence was brutal. I just played chess and hung out with, older crowd. We'd play cards. I just read books. I just I wouldn't say I kept to myself. I was pretty well known actually. They used to call me from the Highlander, Duncan Mcleod. I was pretty well known fella. I just try to get along with everybody and stay out of the politics because there was a lot of, gang members in different politics and stuff. And, I learned very quickly how to navigate. But look, I've always done well in structured environments. Peninsula Village, everything that's structured, I thrive in those environments, like really thrive. So after 10 months, we go in front of, after about 8-9 months, I think it was, we go in front of this judge, right? So I'd never been to court before. They put me they call it a bullpen. So it's a bunch of people waiting for court, right? There was, I don't know, 60 people in this room, maybe 100 square foot. It was jammed and everybody kept coming back. They're like, oh, he threw the book at me, 5 years, 10 years. Like, it's just wild. Some people just, initially they have no emotion for like these big sentences. And I'm like, dude, I'm literally screwed again. Like, this is going to be it. Like, I'm going to be in prison for, 5-10 years, and here I am, like, this all stemmed from me not feeling worthy. And I became addicted to drugs. And then this is where I ended up, and I'm just like, I'm thinking about all this and I'm like, this is just crazy. But they moved me. The correction officer comes in and they're like, Mcleod. I'm like, yeah, right here. And they're like, get over here. I'm like, all right, I'm coming. You got to get through all these people. And they take me up to another floor and they put me in a bullpen that's empty. And I'm like, thank goodness, like that was like saved that just saved me some sanity right there. And I'm pacing back and forth in this, and I'm not like a God-fearing person, and my whole spirituality too is not there right now. But I was just talking to whatever was out there. I'm pacing back and forth, like something. If you're out there, like, yo, let me catch another break, and I'll try to do something different with it. So they come out. They got you got your shackles around your legs. So they take me out into the courtroom. There's nobody. There's only two people, my brother and my mom. I mean, this just goes to show you at the end of the day, nobody cares about, me or what I'm going through, or, people just, all my buddies, my friends, nobody gives a shit about that stuff you think matters. It doesn't matter. And so I'm sitting there and it's like almost 5 o'clock, right? So court obviously runs like 9. Well, it's almost 4 o'clock. It probably runs like 9 to 4, 8 to 4. And the judge, I'll never forget it. He sits back in his chair. He leans way back. He takes off his glasses, puts them down on the desk. He rubs his eyes. And I'm like, oh, shit, is this guy tired? Like, I hope he's okay to still make a good choice here for me. My lawyer and the district attorney go up to the bench. They're there talking for, I don't know, maybe 3 minutes. And he comes back. They ask me, how do you plead? All that stuff. Did anybody promise you any deals or anything? I said, no, nobody promised anything. He says, what did he say? He said 6 to 8 months. 6 to 8 months, Department of Corrections, which basically was my sentence. You have to do 60%, but I already did 8 months to get to this spot. And I mean, the relief I felt, like, holy I mean, I knew right then and there I knew that was my last chance that I would ever get, like, with this type of stuff. Now the interesting ball kind of started to flow, right? Because I lived in the U.S. 17 years, but I had a green card. I wasn't a citizen of the United States. So now what part of the deal was is I would plead guilty to all of the felonies. I don't know, 6 or 7 felonies. But as part of that deal, once I got that conviction, I would go into deportation proceedings. So I would be deported, removed, and banned from the U.S. For those charges. That was part of the deal. That was kind of the railroad. I wouldn't call it a railroad. We all benefited from it, but that was the plan was I would be gone from the U.S. for good. So I had to go to all these different jails, right? So then ICE picked me up, Immigration and Customs Enforcement. They picked me up from the jail, and then I had to go every week or every 2 weeks. I was going to a different jail and staying in these special units. When I say special, I don't mean it was anything nicer than a regular jail, but it was just different places all over the country. And eventually I landed outside of Atlanta, Georgia. And this process took months. If you were going to Mexico, you would probably fly out the next day. But for me, it took months. I was done my sentence, but they still held me for this proceeding to deport me back to Canada. So after a couple of months, I was really sick one night. I didn't sleep for 2 days, and I woke up to use the washroom, and I passed out, and I hit my head on the floor. These cells I was in at the time was 8 guys, and there was just a toilet right in the middle of it. And I mean, I was feeling terrible, and I was going to mention something to the officers and say, hey, like, I'm really not feeling well. But I said, you know what? I got a weird feeling about tonight because I didn't want to. A rumor was as if you were sick, they wouldn't send you back because they don't want to send you back and then something happened and then they be to blame. But I was like really ill, and I don't know why. I never really knew why, but I didn't say anything. Like an hour after that, one of the guys in the cell helped get me up and get me back into bed. And like, I was just shivering cold. I was in bad shape. There was a guy who was about 80 years old from South Africa. I mean, he must have been a mafia type fella or something. I never asked him because I learned that you just don't ask people, that type that But so they packed me up. Immigration, Customs Enforcement, U.S. Marshals, they put me in a van. It was like an unmarked van with like a cage in the back jail cell. They said, you're catching a flight today. I said, oh, thank God, like I've been waiting for this. And they drive me right into the back of actually before that too, they took me downtown Atlanta to the big jail. Like this place 10 stories. It's a scary place too. And then they brought me into the airport. They drove me right back next to the plane. Right. And it was like first class service. No shoelaces. Only things I owned was a box of paperwork, cards and stuff. And they told the stewardess, and the stewardess is just staring at me like I've just taken somebody out. And I'm like, honestly, like I'm just, I'm not that guy. I'm just trying to get home. And they put me on this plane. And once the door closes, they leave. And I got a one-way ticket back here, man. I started my life over. And, I really consider like my sobriety day that day I got arrested, which was January 11th, 2010. That's the day where I was really ready to embrace a new way of living. But the whole word sober too. I'm not like I love it. I mean, sober is cool, right? But sober feels like to me a destination. Like I don't drink or do drugs, and I've made it. My favorite thing is like recovery. I'm on a self exploration, self development journey from that day on to figure out how am I going to live life on life's terms. That's my battle every day. I wake up, I say, how are we going to do this the way we need to do this? So, but then, I mean, I could go into the whole thing. That's been 13 years ago. And then obviously there's recovery. I'll fast track this. I went back to school. I graduated school as an addiction counselor. I started working at a treatment center for adolescents here in Ontario, Canada. And I worked there for 6 years. I got married. Now I have 3 kids, 3 beautiful kids, 1, 3, and 5. They're incredible. My wife's incredibly supportive of this journey. About 6 years ago, I went into that job. I was completely burned out. That we were losing people, 14, 15, 16, 17-year-olds I knew for 6 months. They were busting their ass to better their life. And, they died on toilets at McDonald's. Like it broke me, literally. So I had this sort of vision about like, hey, you got to do something else with your life. I went into work on a Sunday. I printed up a resignation letter and I quit my job. And I kind of started to question, like I was interested in being an entrepreneur. Honestly, I was like, hey, I want to build a business. I want to have a purpose. I don't want to show up somewhere. And it was just killing me. It was literally, I could feel it in my body. I was like, dude, I am dying from this. This is literally like drug addiction, but not drug addiction. I am dying. I am not developing or growing as a person anymore. And when that happens, I got to move. And I'll either move to the good or I'll move back to what I know works and is comfortable. So I moved to the good, and that was 6 years ago, man. And I've started, 5, 6 businesses. Every day I get to do what I love, and I started Sober Motivation too. And I've, that whole vision for the Sober Motivation was to just create a place for people to share their story. Enough with the shame, enough with hiding. It's time to own your truth, share your story, and make a difference. And it was also in turn a place where other people could gain inspiration, I hope, to say, hey, look, so-and-so went through all this shit. I mean, people have been on their deathbeds and they found a way to recover. And we need to share those stories. So that was like the whole Sober Motivation thing. And then, the podcast took off recently. I've had like an incredible privilege to have Jake the Snake Roberts on, Brad Garrett from Everybody Loves Raymond, and Cheryl Burke from Dancing with the Stars, Dan Carity, I mean, the movie star, the TV star himself. And I don't know, man. I some days I hate talking about recovery and sobriety, and some days it's the only thing that maybe keeps me on track. I don't know. That's it in a nutshell, boys.
Man, what a fascinating, like, unreal story, bro. For real. Like, I was like intensely listening the entire time. Real quick though, Andrew, do you have to jump to work?
Yeah, Brad, I gotta jump to work.
Okay.
I appreciate you. This has been like one of the best, probably my favorite story to have listened to on this podcast. It's just, I like looked at the clock and I was like, holy shit, like how did that much time just go by? It was completely captivating, man. And um, yeah, I'll let you guys finish up, but I appreciate you, and hopefully we'll connect soon.
Yes,
Thanks,
awesome.
Andrew.
Thank you so much. And have a good one.
See you guys.
Yeah. See you, brother. But yeah, the sorry that he had to leave. But I did want to continue talking with you if that's all right. I think I relate so much to your feeling of like you sounds like you had this like continuous feeling in the back of your head, like you somewhere deep down, you had um, that urge to do, like, you deserved better than, sleeping on your brother's floor, being in prison, you know, all these things. And then once it finally clicked for you to turn it into being of service for others, whether it's working in recovery or starting the sober motivation page, it sounds like that really, that flip for you was super vital and became your kind of purpose, and I'm at the stage similarly where I just started working in recovery. I started our page like about a year ago. We started the podcast in August. And I relate too. On some days it's like I don't want to necessarily like make my life all be about recovery. I've been kind of I'll be interested to talk with you about this, is like trying to balance, because I work in recovery, I post on recovery, I talk about recovery, I go to meetings, and very quickly it can become this thing where it's like recovery, recovery, recovery. And how have you found a balance in your life now that you're kind of an entrepreneur, and most of your work, it sounds like, is recovery related? Where do you find that balance?
Yeah, no, great question. Yeah. For me, I sum up to recovery for like when I want to change how I'm thinking about it, I just look at it as a self-development thing, a personal development thing where I'm going to just learn different tools. And the tools I'm learning today are not necessarily have anything to do with being sober, but I know one thing: if I'm living my best life, I don't want to use drugs or drink. So my goal today is not even to not do drugs or drink. My goal today is live my best life, because I know if I'm in line with that and I'm in line with my purpose, then I don't have any interest in going back to like the way things used to be.
Yeah.
So I just try to develop myself, professionally as well. And, a lot of the stuff I do too, I just love marketing. I love getting people's messages out there. So even though I do work with a lot of people in the space, I also, do that. That's my bread and butter. That's what I wake up to do every day, is to, help people get their message out there, because we can have a message that can change people's lives. But if we can't get it out to people, we have a message that changes our lives and maybe a
Right.
few people, but so that's what I really try to help out with. But I mean, also my family too, I have the 3 kids, so this stuff keeps me busy. But I'm always, in a place of gratitude, man, for this opportunity. That I guess I earned. I wanted to say that was given to me, but I'm like, nobody gave me shit. I had to show up every day, um, whether I wanted to or not. I showed up every day to escape. I showed up every day to do drugs. It didn't matter. It didn't matter if I had a good day, bad day, yellow day, green day. I think that's where some people get confused. That they're like, "Oh, he's having a bad day, so he's doing drugs." No, I did drugs every day. Good day, didn't
Yep.
matter. It didn't have to have something going on. So therefore, I just try to focus on just being a good person.
Mm.
And you know what? Like, I'm not coming on here and going to sell any dreams that this works out all the time.
Right.
Um, this doesn't work out. This doesn't work out sometimes as well.
Yep.
Um, but I learned from it. I'm willing to develop. I'm willing to learn, to make progress. Because the thing that, when I look back, what scared me most is that I would live a life without a purpose. And when I really look back, I didn't frame it up that way at the time. Like, I had no idea about purpose and, being a business and stuff. Like, I got fired from Red Robin, Little Caesars, Burger King. Like, you know what I mean? Like, and I never passed a tag. Got kicked out of college. Like, doing anything with my life was so far away. So I never could have connected the dots at the time. But I think when I had that kind of window of opportunity about, um, you're gonna die, right? Like, when I'm saying that, I'm talking to myself, I'm gonna die. Um, do you want to go out like this? Is this what you want to be known for? Is this how you want to be remembered? And I knew that I probably, like, of course I'd be remembered by my folks and stuff, but beyond that bubble, like, it would just be I'd just be another person in the ground type deal. Nobody was gonna, be upset about that outside my folks and stuff. And I had the window of opportunity, man, that it just scared the shit out of me. It just scared me. It was never the drug use. It was never the drinking. It was never the dysfunction. It was never prison. It was never death. I'd say it was that I wouldn't live, you know?
Yeah. I mean, I so much relate to you when you talk about all you do is run and all you do is escape. And physically running and escaping is one thing, but taking drugs and alcohol and whatever it is that same escape. And I so loved that. I so loved the emptiness and the getting away, especially if you're in a shitty situation and then you're in these wild places and moving from here to there and doing this and that. But if you have the drugs as a constant to get that numb and that, you can escape, you can be living in a box, but if you have all your drugs and everything, you're living somewhere else. You know what I mean? You can escape from even that box. And I think I hear that in your story. And you talk about I feel like you've had multiple times where you had to have this, I like to call it like a leap of faith into recovery or into something else. And each time it sounds like you might have like had that little jump and then fall back and then little jump and fall back. And I think hearing from you about that, when it finally clicked for good into place, like could you take me like into that moment a little bit, like when you finally started to gain some serious stack some sobriety in a row? Was it just the combination of everything, all your prior experiences? You talked about going to meetings and going to that hardcore treatment center and being in prison. And what was the mentality to finally get like your first 30 days and 60 days and 90 days and 1 year?
Yeah. Well, early on, I went right after I kind of got arrested that day. I was in jail, right? So, I mean, that was
Yeah,
kind of you're limited. You're limited in a
yeah.
sense, right? But that really gave me the opportunity to, you know, remove the distractions of life and really figure out what I wanted to do. And I really took that time to like dig into self-help books and development stuff. I had to figure out like, hey, dude, you have this problem. But I was smart enough and aware enough that drugs and alcohol were not my problem.
Hmm.
So I had to kind of dig deep, and it was ugly, man. It was ugly because of the wreckage from behind, right? And I started to go to meetings too in jail. So I started to do that. I mean, it wasn't like readily available every day or anything, but like once a week we could do that. I got a Celebrate Recovery Bible. And it's kind of strange too, because I'm not that like Bible type church guy, but my
Right.
parents got me this thing there. They enjoy it. I started to read that, man. I still have it today. And I have all this stuff underlined. And I really just what happened, buddy, when I was in jail, I think, is that I really started to build up myself into a person I liked because I
Hmm.
hated myself.
Yep.
Um, and then when I was able to build a little bit of love for myself, I just think it's so much harder if you love yourself and you take a step back from drugs and alcohol. You're poisoning yourself. You're destroying your life. And if you have love for something, like I wouldn't give that shit to my dog. I love
Right.
my dog. I wouldn't give it to my dog, but we'll so easily self-sabotage ourselves to avoid this stuff. And man, there's layers to it. There was layers, right when I think I got somewhere, Mitch, I got something else to work on.
Yep.
So I think I just took it one day at a time, but like of course the ability to use what is available in jail.
Right.
But not really what I wanted to do, man. I read Brandon Novak's book also at the time, and like he lived this wild life. And I had all the self-help books. I was kind of known as like the librarian in a sense, man. My parents would send me in these books and all these hardened gang members and stuff. They would always be like, "Can I borrow the books?" And I'm like, "You guys like these books? Like, you guys are supposed to be these tough guys, man. You guys are reading all these." They loved them, and then we'd pass them around, and it kind of helped me build connection and a little bit of rapport with people, which otherwise I probably never would have. But I mean, it was slow and steady, man. And then when I got out of jail too, I started over. Like I was back at my grandparents' place, and I had to start from scratch. It was slow and steady, man.
Yep.
Nothing about this was like an overnight success. Nothing about it. It was like 10 years of going through it and picking up little pieces here and there. And then when I was ready, maybe like when my mind was ready to accept this stuff, the change started to happen.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. I think the self-love and juxtaposed against that self-hate, you know, I truly relate to. I think yeah, I mean, if you break it down to that, like throughout my entire using time, it was uncomfortable in the setting that I was in, uncomfortable with who I was, and a lot of self-hate that I've even, experienced into recovery, continually trying to work on loving who I am truly, and stacking how what I work, what I do, my schedule, my recovery, all in a positive way to get to a point where I'm loving myself more and more, because if you don't, then there's no real point in trying to improve or get better. I think for me too, you talked about not having too much of a community, or friend, like a lot of friends when you were younger, and that young, one of my favorite things that I've been reciting, is that we're all just little boys with bigger shadows. And so that a lot of that stuff kind of carries over into as we're getting older. And it carried over for me for sure. Growing up, I grew up with just a single mother and no brothers and sisters. And I kind of did whatever I could to try to get into those groups. And so I kind of had the opposite in the terms of I saw them doing drugs. So I was like, found my way to the drugs so that I could blend in with them, just to try to get that community. And I think that's why I really started the recovery page a couple of years ago, and trying to build the community and build that, because I've always had that loneliness. It's a disease of isolation at its center. And yeah, I mean, it all makes a lot of sense once you spread it all out. Like, there's a couple things that we all have in common when it comes to how we perceive ourselves, and stuff like that. So I really appreciate you sharing um, with me and Andrew. And you have a fascinating story. I mean, you're like a walking miracle, bro. I mean, like, it sounds like, seriously, I mean, just listening to you today, I'm going to be thinking about that. I know for sure the rest of the day into the next couple. And um, very impactful. I mean, you're a special guy for real.
Well, thanks, Mitch. Thanks for having me. And I love that too, that you shared that part. And that's the honest truth, is that it's I had a buddy of mine, Luke, on the podcast recently, and we're all familiar with this quote, but he shared it. And it just made sense at the time. It's very simple, but the road to recovery is always under construction. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that's just a human. And, I'm grateful for that, like where you shared, hey, you're still struggling with this stuff. You're still working through this stuff. That's the beautiful thing about it, is we get an opportunity to actually do something to improve ourselves and be
Yeah.
aware of it.
Now that we're
It's
sober.
so powerful. Yes, exactly. Other than just going through the motions and just causing madness everywhere. So,
Right.
but no, thank you so much for having me on here, man. It's been a blast. I hope I didn't carry on like too long, but
No,
try,
no, it was
tried to
amazing.
short it up.
No, it was
Okay.
absolutely amazing. I can't thank you enough. Yeah, I mean, even just sitting here now, like, I'm kind of at a loss of words, because I'm gonna have to like rethink about everything. And I'm sure as soon as we finish, I'm gonna have a bunch of things I wanted to ask you. But um, I wanted to sincerely say thank you for everything that you do in terms of posting and talking openly about your recovery. I don't think that's noted enough, and I don't think people fully understand that weighs on us, in a positive way for sure. But it can also be, that pressure is something that we always have to be wary of when it comes to our recovery, because as long as we're honest, I think it's good. But there was definitely a point when I was posting and shit, and I was like, thinking about using and shit, and posting like, just for today, like, I'm all good, but doing what we're doing,
Yeah.
putting our faces on the internet, or on, Instagram, and putting our faces on our recovery, and sharing that experience, strength, and hope. I want to say thank you for doing that, because your impact is probably, I know for me and from what I've seen, is probably massively widespread. You probably have no idea how many people that you've helped either plant the seed of recovery, or um, helped just straight up. So thank you very much for what you're doing.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, anything we can do to try to make a difference, man. I mean, my big motivation is, dude, I felt so hopeless, and I felt so alone on this journey, but when I got into this, it was, before all this stuff. Um, and I don't want anybody to have to go through that. I don't want anybody to have to say, like there's no hope for me because my story is so unique. Even though we all do have our own unique stories, you'll find similarities if you look for them in other people's stories, and
Yep.
it can be so powerful. So, and you're doing great
Yeah.
too. So keep it. I mean, keep rocking. Stick with it.
I appreciate it. Yeah. We're trying to be consistent and honestly, bro, and Andrew and I always say this. I'm sorry that he couldn't be here for the feedback to you because I see him texting me like, damn, that was fucking the wildest thing I've ever heard. But at some point we can get another episode in or something like that because I'd love to continue talking with
Yeah.
you. But it's like oh, what was I just gonna say? The Oh, being consistent. Oh yeah. We always say that at the end of the day, whether we post it or when we get 1 view, 2 view, whatever, I mean, we're really not tripping off that. It's like this is like a meeting for me, This grew my recovery, this grew Andrew's recovery and your recovery and strengthened us today. So for that, after that, really doesn't matter. You know what I mean? And we've tried to sustain that perspective on things. But for everyone
Yeah.
out there listening, this was episode 29 with Brad. Absolutely. Probably, I think that this was, I'll stand on my favorite one that we've done to this point. So thank you so much for coming on, man. And thank you all for listening. And we will keep coming back.
Yeah. Thank you.